Would I recommend WindowsFX for the average computer user? The average computer user has several expectations for how their computer should behave. Several checkboxes WindowsFX does hit in aping Windows 10, but are there other points that would drive the average user back to Microsoft's arms? Let's get right into it. Downloading WindowsFX, particularly the free edition, is not hosted on their website, at least as far as I could tell. Ultimately, I had to retrieve it via a torrent found elsewhere. It may be that the people offering WindowsFX are trying to avoid a cease and desist order from Microsoft. However, the requirement to pay for any version makes it something of an obvious target for litigation, especially considering they're including Microsoft property within the ISO. There's wallpapers, icons, and so on. Comparing this to Lindows or Linspire as it is off the mark. Linspire did not include materials Microsoft developed. Right from the get-go, I can't say WindowsFX has a good standing for the average user, not only for them to retrieve in the first place, but if they should even use it at all. Common rumblings from the Linux community is that KDE is the most Windows-like, so I liked it to test the Plasma edition. The average user won't know this, and would likely pick either or the Plasma or Cinnamon editions. However, I don't think this makes much of a difference for my review. I am using VirtualBox to test WindowsFX. Unfortunately, the screen resolution flips to 800 by 600 no matter the resolution chosen. Off camera, I did try setting this for several minutes, however, it simply would not set. This might not affect actual hardware, but I feel as though I must make note of it. The rest of the installation went smoothly. On first logon, I was still experiencing the issue with the screen resolution, so I took a moment to install the VirtualBox guest add-ons and restart. Some applications keep coming up to nag me to set them up. KWallet is one. KWallet is a fine application, however, I have no clue as to why it would be running by default on startup. The software the average user sees on the desktop and the taskbar are the programs they will use. Most average users don't use the start menu. If you look at most average users' computers, all the software they use automatically created a shortcut on their desktop. This is the default behavior on their smartphones and tablets and most software on their Windows PC, and the average user will treat these as the only programs installed on their PC. I can say this because I have worked with the average and professional people for the better part of a decade now, and can honestly say that the most common thing I have to do for people is create a shortcut for them because they can't or won't use the start menu. The default icons on the taskbar, Helloa being a Cortana-like program made for WindowsFX, acts as something of a nag with several pop-ups while trying to bypass setup. I don't use voice commands with my computer or other devices, so I don't feel as though I can rightly judge this Google API app as whether or not it's worth its salt. Google Chrome is an odd choice to be the default browser pinned to the taskbar for a Windows-like Linux clone, especially considering the developer edition of Edge is already installed. For files, the application is Dolphin on the Plasma edition at least, and works fine. And lastly, the software store also works fine. It's a functional option for people who want a graphical store for installing software. If the average user does find their way into the start menu, some software installed are a strange choice to say the least. AnyDesk for most average users is a vector used by scammers to gain access to your PC and trick you into giving them money or personal information that they can use to abuse your credit. Same goes for TeamViewer. Neither of these should be installed by default. I mean, hell, AnyDesk is running right from the get-go. If a user knows well enough to use these programs for their own use, then they know well enough how to install them. Deja, Dupe, and Timeshift are a nice inclusion to automate backing up your PC, and the average user with a friend or family member that promotes backing up their files may even use one of them. I do like OnlyOffice, but renaming the shortcuts and giving the icons Microsoft Office branding only serves to confuse the average user, especially for a distro that advertises itself to be a Linux distro that runs Windows applications. OnlyOffice programs in the Start menu won't launch if OnlyOffice is already running, which would aggravate the average user not realizing that they can launch the other Office Suite programs from within the already open OnlyOffice program. Advertising your distro as improved compatibility for EXE and MSI, in other words, Windows compatible, is a bad move. Wine is a fine compatibility layer. However, anyone who has ever used Wine will tell you that it takes a large amount of customizing and tweaking to get your applications to run smoothly. The average person will read this the same way they read Windows Vista Ready, only to be sorely disappointed when it doesn't run as advertised. Advertising compatibility where it is at its best spotty would sour any new to Linux user looking to find a stopgap between Windows and Linux. This alone is reason enough for me to say stay away from WindowsFX, even if they get so far as to figuring out where to download it. One point I can say FX has going for it is that Zoom is in the repository. The average user won't know where to start with choosing which package to download for Linux on this. WindowsFX is Debian based, by the way. Having it in the repository is a big plus. WindowsFX is by all means an interesting project. However, I could not in any way recommend it to the average computer user. Maybe it would stand up fine as something to distract scammers in instead of letting them into your own PC, but I could not recommend this for most use cases. The obvious issue of attempting to match Microsoft's Windows 10, going so far as to lift their assets directly, and the strange choices for installed applications completely turns me off regardless of the end user's technical level. What do you think of my assessment for WindowsFX for the average user? Thumbs up if you agree, thumbs down if you don't. Please share a comment if you have more to say, and give me a subscribe if you'd like to hear from me. Thank you very much.